Alright, welcome back, Brush Monkeys. Today I want to talk about another game changer item that I came across when I got back into painting, and this is something that apparently had been taken off for some time by the time I got back into it, but I just recently discovered it, and that's wet palettes. Wet palettes are a fantastic way of keeping your paints fresh if you don't have a whole lot of time to paint. Like I say, I've only got an hour a day to paint, but I want to get this guy painted up, and I mix up some special colors for his armor or his cloak or what have you. But I only get an hour to paint, so I have to walk away from this and then come back the next day and pick up where I left off. A wet palette allows you to use the same paints. Your paints won't dry up from day to day like they will with the dry palette like one of these. The wet palette is basically it's an airtight box with a sponge in it. And this example that I'm using here is the P3 wet palette. And this is not the sponge that came with it. This is just a piece of miniature foam that came with another figure. I just cut it to size. The P3 palette actually comes with a smaller sponge, and it didn't quite fill up the space, and so I cut a larger piece of foam for it. And then on top of that foam, once you get it wet, you put a piece of palette paper, which P3 has their own, which are sized for that's what I was digging out of the bottom there, sized for their wet palette. And you just put that in on top of it when it's wet. And then you put your paints. This is a semi-permeable paper. You put your paints on top of that, and then you can paint from there, and it draws enough water from the sponge to keep the paints moist. When you're done painting for the day, you just close it up, keeps it airtight. You can come back the next day and pick up where you left off and start painting again. Now I use this P3 palette for probably 5 or 6 years, and this was a fantastic thing. This completely changed my painting. The P3 wet palette is a perfectly serviceable wet palette, and you'll find this in most game stores. I got this at my local game store. Like I said, it's just a plastic box. It comes with a pad of palette paper, and like I said, I cut a larger piece of foam for it. Thing about the P3 palette is it's not entirely airtight. So while you're painting, it'll dry out a little bit. The edges of the paper will curl up, that kind of thing. And let me just wet the sponge so you can see what I'm talking about here. Where's that in there? It's been a while since I've used this one. This video is also going to be a little bit of a review of a couple of different wet palettes. My local game store started carrying a Masterson wet palette recently. That's the only one I will not be reviewing right now. There's 3 main types that are available to miniature painters. There's the P3 palette, the Masterson palette, and then Redgrass Games came out with an Everlasting wet palette. And I have the P3 and the Everlasting, and those are the ones I'll be reviewing today. The P3 palette, like I said, once you get it good and wet there, take your palette paper, lay it down, and you can see it takes a little getting to it to get it to lay out flat. You get it wet on one side, and then you flip it over and do the other side, and that prevents it from curling up, theoretically. Smooth it out with your fingers. Smooth it out, smooth it out, smooth it out. They're kind of fidgety to get them to lay flat, but that's basically what you've got. And then you put your paints on that, and you're good to go. The thing I don't like about the P3 palette is if I take this to the hobby store to paint, or I take this to an event to paint, or I do a local art show in the Kansas City area, and I paint there, and I have to throw away the paper. I have to dry out the sponge, wring it out, and all that kind of thing, because no, it's not going to do it this time. Seriously? There we go. I don't know if you can see that, but just shaking it slightly, I'm getting my workbench all wet. It's not entirely airtight, which is not fantastic for a wet palette. It means over time, your paints will dry out sitting in it. That is not ideal. So yeah, well, the P3 palette worked for a long time, and it eventually kind of outlived its usefulness and had to go away. I since got the Redgrass Games wet palette, and I've got my stickers on there already. It came with this fantastic little thing. It's just wells for ink and washes and that kind of thing, but it's magnetic. See the little magnets on there? It just snaps on just like that. Or there's magnets on the side and it can snap on up there if you prefer it up here. You know, you can put it anywhere. I like to have it down there because it's right where it's useful. And then the palette itself is just a very thin piece of foam. Again, you get it wet. And they've got their own hydration paper. Looks like this. It comes with a bunch of these. I ordered, I think, 2 or 3 more packs of them because it's coming from Europe, so I wanted to make sure I didn't run out. But you take one of these, put it down on top of the paper, or put it down on top of the foam rather. Again, you smooth it out with your fingers. Unlike the P3 palette, you don't really have to like wet it, then flip it over, and then wet it again. You can put it down and just kind of smooth it out with your fingers, and once it stops fighting it and curling up, it's good to go. And as you can see, the hydration paper covers the entire foam. This thing is ready to be used, and it's wonderful. And the best thing about it is it's got this little, I don't know if you can see that little gray line running around there, that's a rubber seal on it. So you close that up, and then it comes with this elastic strap as well. You can put that around it. Not sure why that fell off. So there you go. Now it's all tied up. You shake it. Nothing's coming out of there. This is completely watertight. This thing is beautiful. This is by far one of my favorite tools I use as a miniature painter. Is this, like I said, using a wet palette in general has completely changed my painting. Using this wet palette in particular has been a game changer. I have left paint in here for, let's see, the paper I just recently took off of it to clean it was on there for about 2 months, and it went through 3 or 4 different miniature painting projects with the same paint on it. I just, when I was using it, I had a little bit of paint on there, and then the next project I put a couple more rows on there. When it got up to about the halfway point, I just turned it around, put some more paint on there, and then some more paint, and so, like I said, 3 or 4 miniature projects all went through the same sheet of paper. And by the time I was done and the entire sheet was covered with little droplets of paint, the paint I started with was still good to go. It was still viable paint. It was still wet. Depending on the manufacturer, some colors may separate a little bit. You just stir them back up and they're good to go. It doesn't absorb so much water into the paint that it becomes watery or like a wash. It just kind of, the color separates a little bit. And again, you stir it and it's just like if it had separated in the bottle. You know, you give it a stir and you can go back to using it. This is hands down one of the best miniature painting tools I have ever come across. It's a little pricey, around, let's see, my order was $60, but it was for this, and like I said, it came with a little thing of washes. It came with one thing of palette paper. I ordered 3 other packets of palette paper, so I had probably 200 sheets of palette of paper for it. there's two different sizes of this. This is the painter size. There's also what they call a Studio XL, which is blue and it's roughly twice the size of this. It's two of these side by side. But yeah, if you have the means, I would definitely recommend one of these things. It's from Redgrass Games. They're not paying me to endorse this or anything. I've used it. It's fantastic. I'm endorsing the hell out of it. So that's it. Get yourself a wet palette. Try it out. I said I wasn't going to talk about the Masterson wet palette. I have read some reviews about the Masterson, and for the Masterson wet palette is a large white plastic wet palette, and it is intended for use with acrylic paints, and it's intended for canvas painters, not necessarily miniature painters. The reason I bring that up is because the palette paper that comes with the Masterson has a tendency to shed into the paint, meaning it'll leave little fibers in the paints. It's more like using a paper towel rather than an actual palette paper. And like I said, for canvas painting, that's not a big deal. The canvas is kind of fabric anyways, and so the fibers just kind of disappear into the brush strokes on the canvas, and it's not a big deal. For miniature painters, it's a disaster. And so all the reviews I've seen of the Masterson wet palette for miniature painters say to throw out the paper that comes with it and get some better parchment paper, usually like baking parchment, and use that instead of the palette that comes with it. For that reason, I'm not going to go out and buy a Masterson palette just to review it for this video. I'm just going to stick to the two that I've used. The P3 palette, like I said, is a great palette. It's I think it's $20 for the wet palette and one pack of palette papers. And you can buy extra packs of palette paper. And this one, like I said, is pretty good and beat up, but it's been with me for 6 years now, and it's a great little tool. It did its job for as long as I needed it to, and then when I upgraded to the Redgrass Games palette, the Everlasting Wet palette, it really made a huge difference, and I'm not looking back. So anyway, that is the last video I'm going to do before we actually get on to putting paint to some of these figures. So my next video is probably going to be a paint along. That said, thanks for joining me for this, and go out there and try to get some wet palettes and give it a shot and see how it works for you. Some people's painting style doesn't work for wet palettes. If you're still doing like old school base coat, wash, dry brush kind of painting, you probably don't need a wet palette. If you have a lot of time to sit down and paint, you probably don't need a wet palette. But if you don't have a whole lot of time to devote to your hobby per day, or you do a lot of layering, or you mix a lot of custom colors or that kind of thing, a wet palette is really going to make a huge difference in your painting. So I would definitely recommend picking one up and trying it out. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys later. Thank you. Bye. Hey everybody, Tom from Flying Monkey Studios here. Thanks for watching my videos. If you like what you saw, hit the like button. If you want to be notified when new videos come out, click subscribe. And in the meantime, if you want to support me in any way, check out my Patreon site, Facebook page, and Instagram page. And comment below on what you want to see on future videos. Thanks a lot. See you later.